did we anticipate Amethyst and Steel to be where they are today?
As individual inks?
As
Or are you talking
individual
about the
inks
ink
or
combination of
together,
Amethyst?
or individual or together. Did we expect the top two ink colors, if you will, being Steel and Amethyst at Fabled launch, and now 3 weeks into Fabled?
I
Yeah,
wholeheartedly think that we did. Amber Steel was already proven with maybe not Steelsong, but we saw that it was beginning to go into that aggro Amber Steel. We saw that even with the removal of a lot of Steelsongs, that it was still hanging around in some way, shape, or form with different ways and unique ways that it finds to have card draw. Also plays into Amethyst, which is one of the only inks that has pure card draw.
you're a card draw. Card draw that lets you establish a body on the board as well, I think is a huge thing. That, like Genie, for example. So I remember before Fable, we were actually at Gen Con, and I remember there was some leaks going around, and I remember my wife messaging me, and she's like, "I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there's a few cards that is going to make Blurple insane." I was like, "Whatever, like Blurple's Blurple," but here we are. Not going to talk specific. So, spoiler: Amethyst and Steel probably your two most popular ink colors right now. Not going to talk necessarily about the event itself, but we have a few notes here on the decks that were played at probably the most significant event that has happened in Fabled, because the CCQ, for those who are not tracking, there was an event in Denver put on by PPG Events. It is not a DLC, but it was Ravensburger supported, where promo cards for DLC Season 2 were available for redemption. Playmats were available for redemption, and also the very first North America Continentals invite was given out to the first place winner today, like literally less than 3 hours ago. That's why this event had a lot of eyes on it. But from a state of play, Amethyst is extremely popular, but we'll break down the decks. From that CCQ, a total of 88 Blurple decks. Which, if you would have told me 4 sets ago it would have been like this, I would be like, "No, you lie," and like, there's no way. But 88 Blurple, 63 Amethyst Steel, 47 Emerald Sapphire, 38 Amber Steel, and then 8 Sapphire Steel, 7 Amber Emerald, 5 Ruby Amethyst, and 5 Emerald Amethyst. So Steel and Amethyst have a very large representation, not only in the more competitive side of things, but also locally as well. There's a lot of people playing Steel. Powerline decks, for example, you have green or Emerald Amethyst, and I'm trying not to call green blue. I'm going to stick with the thematics, but Emerald Amethyst, you still have very strong, you still have those colors being played, but a lot of people, and there's been a lot of hoopla recently over, oh my goodness, this is happening. Why is this happening? And from a state of the ink conversation, right now, it's Blurple is, I think, is the deck to beat right now if you are playing in a competitive environment. But also, you had Amber Steel go in a mirror match for the first place for that invite during the CCQ. So we're going to try not to talk about these as, decks per se, but more so the ink color itself. But a lot of people are immediately drawing comparisons to the Sapphire problem that we had back in, goodness, when was that? Arcasia's? Azurite?
Yeah, maybe it was
Oh, goodness gracious.
around
Hold on.
there.
I'm going to have to Google this. It was 5 months
Right
ago,
before Greg Tito came.
right before Greg Tito came. It was 5 months ago. So what would that be? That would be April? Yeah, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, a lot of people are comparing this to the Sapphire problem we had before, where we had a high amount of decks playing Sapphire, and then we got
70%, I believe.
70%. And Tamatoa was $70. Now we are looking at Amethyst at Again, same ballpark percentage, 70% at $70 Dumbo. This is something we've talked about a little bit of our Discord. We're seeing a lot of chatter online. Dylan and I have talked about this ourselves, but I think why is it happening, I think, is a question that a lot of listeners are going to be interested in. So, Dylan, from your perspective, why are we seeing this happen? Kick off our conversation.
Again, from my own perspective, and from what has been told in the lorecast and stuff, he hit the reset button. That's all it boils down to. I absolutely love to see this. I mean, they wanted to reset the quote unquote meta. We look at what decks were popular and not popular before. Our strongest ink combination and inks that we had prior to Fabled, Sapphire and Ruby, especially Ruby Sapphire DKP.
Yep.
Out of those top decks that you just listed, how many of them were actually Ruby Sapphire decks?
0.
Okay, and we see very, very little Ruby decks in general.
5.
All right.
At CCQ.
5.
Denver.
Do you know what the lowest or the least used ink color was in the World Championship and the DLCs before the World Championship? Emerald. Now it's one of the top. I know that we're talking Amethyst Steel, but even Emerald, all of our people, all of our friends and fellow Illumineers over in the Discord who absolutely love Emerald Sapphire and have been riding its coattails. 47 decks at this CCQ, Emerald Sapphire, and we also see 5 of the Emerald Amethyst. We have Amber Emerald. Like, yep, Emerald's making a rise. It all boils down to the fact that this was a reset. We lost cards. We don't have the same cards we had before. And again, I think me and you talked a little bit before the podcast started. Yes, people are comparing this to the Sapphire issue.
Mm-hmm.
I am comparing this to the first chapter and Rise of the Floodborn. Because we saw and we felt the same way about Ruby Amethyst decks. We see some Ruby Amethyst on here still. There's 5. It's still kicking. It's always going to stay around. But Ruby Amethyst used to be the one deck that absolutely dominated these DLCs and these major events, these third-party events for cash money. And it is what it is. As more sets are released, more cards are released, we have more options and more decks will appear. At this time, we're only going to see 3 or 4 main meta decks. Again, meta being what we define as what works. So if we have everybody getting online and saying these 3 or 4 decks are what work, that's all we're going to see. But then later on in Whispers, this could look completely different whenever we get the DLCs and CCQs around that time.
Detectives left and right.
Right. And may we not forget DLC Atlanta. Never forget, right? All the popular decks. What ended up winning?
Okay. It was Fairy Dog Mother.
It's your boy.
Ember.
Out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. Amber Amethyst came out and won in a meta that was dominated by Ruby Amethyst and beginning to be by Sapphire Ruby at that time, and even some Emerald Steel that came out in Rise of the Floodborn with Bucky and Diablo and everybody else around that time. And I don't know. I don't think this is big of an issue, and I don't think Ravensburger thinks this is as big of an issue, and they realize that this is going to happen anytime that you have a rotation and that you lose core pieces to a lot of cards. One thing that sticks out to me the most is the fact that Amethyst is being able to stick around the way it is without the bounce package. We've always talked about how Amethyst will always have the core pieces.
Yep.
I don't know.
As somebody who played Blurple, here's my take on it. I think there's 2 reasons. There's one main reason why I think Blurple is, I think, the deck to beat right now, in which Ember Steel did, which is awesome. Let's not forget that happened today. But Blurple had the least amount of cards rotated out in the deck. We lost Friends. We lost Let It Go, kinda. Some people were running it. We lost Mimfox. Like Chernobot, I don't even know Chernobot. Like we lost a few things, but everything else stayed. Elsa, Genie, Iago, Hades, Big Elsa, Monstro, even Anna. We even got a lot of really good reprinted cards. I don't know if Hypnotic Strength was reprinted, but Hypnotic Strength is run things back. So I think that's why I think Blurple is very strong right now, is because I had the least amount of cards, at least top of mind, had the least amount of cards rotated out. We didn't lose a whole lot. And granted, I haven't played Blurple since the set began. I have it sleeved, but I haven't played it. But I think that's a big cause as to why Blurple is just it's almost perfect right now. It is a very strong deck. You got Into the Unknown, which is insane to sing on turn 3. So I had opinions about this earlier in the week. I did a lot of play testing with a few friends earlier in the week, and I think it goes back to one. I don't think Dumbo's worth his price tag right now, because I haven't watched all the events that have happened, but he's just not putting in a whole lot of work. But I think the main challenge for everyone, and asking the question, how do we fix this? And obviously, Ravensburger, I think it goes without saying, they do play testing. I think they are aware of it, and even goes back to Gen Con. I forget who mentioned it. Was it Naomi, maybe, or was it Elaine, maybe? One of them mentioned that there was a meta deck. I hate using the term meta on this show because this is who State of the Inks, but there's another competitively viable deck that we had not discovered yet. And now set rotation happened. Yeah, I think it was Elaine. But that's probably gone because it's rotated out. So a lot of people are calling for bans. I'm not gonna lie. Whenever we got past week 2, I was immediately thinking, like, okay, like, will they allow this state to enter a DLC? And I don't think card bans are coming. I don't see that happening right away. Now, if we get into whispers and things are kind of this way, maybe, I don't know. But I think the main challenge is, I think we all need to be challenging ourselves of what answers the meta. Because there's never going to be a one cookie cutter deck that answers everything. That's just not a healthy state. If there is, they'll take action. But I think a lot of it, too, is there's trial and tested decks. And I think with the comfortable thing is to just hot swap what's legal now with those decks and then go forth. So Dylan and I talked about this yesterday. I think the counter to a lot of the popular decks right now is going to be Ruby.
We're seeing it as not very popular deck. No. Here with like these deck lists that are coming out, very, very few are Ruby decks. We had 5 Ruby Amethysts. Is that all we're seeing in Ruby?
5 Ruby Amethysts at the CCQ. Now there's a lot of events, but let's just say the big one. Let's just say 5 Ruby decks.
And there's different ways it can go. Let's say, I mean, we know that Amber Steel won. Cool. Amber Steel won. What beats Amber Steel? What beats that aggro? Challenger heavy decks that are going to be able to gain board control and passive lure by controlling the board. Then you throw in the idea of power line, going all the way back to what we originally talked about in the beginning. What is one, outside of the Ruby Amethyst and the Ruby Sapphire decks, what core deck did we constantly see through Season 1 stay up top along with all the rest? Steelsong.
Yep.
Always there. Always there. So if Ruby Steel is potentially the new Steelsong with the addition of Ruby Singers, maybe Steelsong is still alive and well. You're just looking at the wrong ink colors, people.
Yep. Without going back to what we talked about previously, it's just a matter of figuring things out. It's going to be a good challenge for folks to figure out. I'm very excited for Set Champ season because I can't wait to see what people cook up. Because I think I am optimistic. I'll admit I wasn't too optimistic about a week ago. Now that I have started to play 2 callers that I haven't played a whole lot, I am fairly I'm not all doom and gloom that I was a week ago. I'll say that. Like, I think that's a good way. But I think it goes without saying, in the lore cast, I think Greg and Rochelle, admittedly, I haven't watched the full thing. Dylan had to update me on this, but they did nod to what is going on. I think it would be the appropriate synopsis. I think would be a good way. They made a nod to what was going on.
They have eyes everywhere. I mean, it's like
Always
we always
watching.
post raws. Yeah, we're always watching. They are completely aware of what the big, or again, quote unquote meta, because we are the ones who define the meta of what decks are up top and what people are playing. But as Rochelle also said in the Lorecast, the meta isn't just what decks are there and what work, but it's the mental mind game of, okay, if this is what works, what can I bring that's going to counter what everybody else is playing?
And we know there's counters. We've seen it. We've seen some of it. So I'm optimistic. I'm excited. I think is the bigger thing. It's a good challenge. It was bound to happen. You know, it's natural. People take what works, replaces what got rotated out. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens, especially whenever we get into Fabled. But again, I think to put a lid on it, the mindset that we had pre-Fabled is no more. We need to go back to scratch. Everyone just needs to start from scratch and just not reinvent the game. But we are all at a level probably the most level playing field so far. You know, still got some things to figure out, but I'm optimistic. There's my
Be patient as these new sets are released. We'll have more answers.